last month. That gentleman in the back with the glasses.
No, he didn't want to. I was strong eye contact. Come.
Yes, it is.
It's okay. It's going to be okay.
Mais encore.
Thanks, guys. If you have questions, you're going to be the first on my list. Thank you. I like your style. Thank you. You too. Yeah.
Et merci encore. C'était fabuleux. Merci. Oui. Oui, alors. Oh, bonne journée.
We have one extra.
Merci. I have my gourd. I have my gourd.
All right, welcome back. For those who are arriving, just please come all the way to the front row because so the guys can see some faces here. All right, while they're getting ready with the last few things, I'm just going to say hello again for this panel discussion. So the discussion is led by Katell Goulven, who is Executive Director of the Hoffmann Global Institute at INSEAD. And the funny thing is actually I got to know Katell through an initiative is called the Business Schools for Climate Leadership, where HEC and INSEAD and IESE actually is a part of it, where Mike is coming from. So she got everything done for the COP26. She was our hero on stage over there. And we have the pleasure to have her here to model this panel today. So thank you so much for accepting this.
Thanks. Okay, welcome everybody. Come closer. It's going to keep us warmer, more positive, more energetic. Come, and inclusive. Okay, great. So we had the fantastic lecture, right? And now we are the theory of it, and now we're going to discuss practice here, right? The title of this session is called Engaging Stakeholders for Climate Action. So basically, thank you, sir. See, it worked. There you go, perfect, front row, love it. Okay, thanks. So we've had a little recall of the science to start the day. We know that having the evidence on science is not enough because nothing is moving fast enough, so that we know, or otherwise we have had only one IPCC report. Then we had the fantastic lecture about the theoretical solutions, the 160 euro for the price of carbon. We also know that having the evidence on these fantastic solutions doesn't work, otherwise it would have been done. So here we're going to bring a little bit of realism to the conversation, and we have basically three objectives in this conversation. The first one is to give you a little bit of a state of the play in terms of which stakeholder does what on climate action, number one. And here we have representatives from different parts of the stakeholder groups. Number two, as some of you are going to graduate and some of you might not going to graduate soon, but might consider a career change, I'm being inclusive. The second objective is to see what are the jobs, what kind of job exists inside and outside the business world to push for climate action. There are plenty of options you're going to see, and that's great. And the third objective of this panel is, even if you consider joining a business, when you take the job, you won't have a choice. You're going to have to work with stakeholders. So we also want you to equip you a minimum on how to work with them, okay? So these are the three objectives. And what I'm going to start by doing, because of course everybody has fantastic bios that I only glanced at, I'm going to ask every speaker to introduce themselves. And we're going to start with our guest online. Mr. Canfin, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Oh, and everything works. Thank you, the tech crowd in the back. It's all working perfectly. So you are the chair. Your name came up a lot in the first part. I don't know if you were here to... You didn't hear? Okay, well, buckle up. I will have the questions for you. It's there on my notes. So you are the chair of the Environmental Committee at the European Parliament. So as a way to introducing yourself, can you tell me what does the day job look like? What are you doing today?
Well, my day job is the reason why I'm not with you today in Paris, because I'm in my office in Brussels to negotiate the the climate package that we will vote on in the plenary of the European Parliament next week. But the deadline to compromise is Wednesday, so I can tell you that I have 3 very busy days to try to move the Green Deal forward.
And so most of the conversation are happening in the Environmental Committee at the Parliament, or is that across committees as well?
Well, the Environment Committee is the largest committee now of the European Parliament,
Yeah.
more than 80 members. And I would say the vast majority of the text regarding the climate package and the Green Deal are led by the Environment Committee. So we voted in the committee already, but now it's the plenary. So it's all the 700 and so members of the European Parliament that will have to decide either to move the Green Deal forward and to have in the European law new rules for carbon market, new rules for standards for CO2 for cars, for social climate fund, and so on and so on and so on. Or if we are facing a conservative majority, that would kill the Green Deal. Because to be honest, in 1 week time, that's what we are going to vote on. Either we go forward with the Green Deal and with very much increased ambition on climate action, or we face an addition of conservatisms and we fail. So you can imagine that it's a huge responsibility as the chair of the ENV committee. I'm one of the key negotiators for that. So that's both very exciting, but also very demanding.
A lot of pressure. Okay, we'll come back to that. Thank you very much for the introduction. We also have today with a professor like Rosenberg. I think it's the first time I called you professor, but as we are here in this setting, I should. So you are professor of practice of management. Yes. So what does that mean?
So a professor of practice, it means I've been in the business school a long time and I don't do too much strict academic research.
What does that mean, strict academic research?
So academic research is very important in the world. It's very important to develop academic science and
right.
social science and management science. But something different is teaching. Something different is working with companies. Something different is trying to make things happen in the world and organizing things. So I'm the IESE representative in our business schools for climate leadership. I teach a class called Strategy and Sustainability. I've been teaching since 2010. Yep. I have another one on geopolitics, and I also spend a lot of my time working with companies and business who come to the business school looking to transform their own management teams and embrace new ideas, including sustainability.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for being with us, Mike. Lucie. Lucie Pinson, you're the founder and the executive director of Reclaim Finance. So I think they work just, you can speak and I think they
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Welcome. So what do you do at Reclaim Finance?
So I founded the NGO 2 years ago after working for 10 years for other organizations on climate and finance. And Reclaim Finance is a campaign and research organization. So we are focusing on financial institutions, banks, insurers, and investors, with a main focus on climate and energy issues, considering the climate emergency that we are here now. And what we do is that first we do a lot of research and analysis regarding the state of the plate right now and the issues and the solutions that we present to financial institutions. Unfortunately, that's usually not enough to make these big financial institutions move. So we also run public campaigns to put pressure on them, and that's the final point. But it we also have to tackle the issues such as regulation, central banks, or other like in players of the financial sector, such as the index providers, or the brokers, or the rating agencies, the voting agencies. So we are working on the whole financial system, trying to move all players from this system together for.
And when you say trying to move all players, do you bring them together for conversation? Do you work as an advocate? What does that mean concretely, bringing all players to move in the right direction?
So we do have bilateral discussion with most of them, but we also organize like roundtables or webinars under the Chatham House rule most of the time to stir up discussion among industry players. And then usually we do have to publish some reports and do what we can call like naming shaming, or use like a carrot and a stick to make them move.
Thanks for being with us, Lucie. Now, next we have Quentin Bordet, who works with BCG, and we're very interested in knowing what you do at BCG, but you're here to speak as a porte-parole of Les Collectifs. So can you tell us what they do?
Yes, indeed. Happy to be here at HEC. So I'm working at BCG in the climate and sustainability practice. I've been there for 6 years, and here I'm spokesperson for Les Collectifs. It's a network of employee collectives acting for ecology at the workplace. This is a movement that we've seen emerging in the last years in company quite organically, with like grassroots communities of employees decided that they wanted to launch tangible initiatives at the workplace to raise awareness, to do active lobbying for more sustainability in the company products and services, etc. So they form grassroots communities. I created myself one at BCG 4 years ago. But now they are collectives in more than 150 companies. So 1 year ago, we decided to create an association out of nowhere called Les Collectifs, because we saw that the experience that these employees were having in their companies trying to push a climate agenda where they were, so as normal employees, whatever the job was, had commonalities. So we created this inter-companies network.
Okay, thanks. And we'll hear more about these dynamics and how you're pushing the agenda forward, but basically changing the company from within. And our final guest, but not least, is Yannick Servant, who's the co-founder of Convention Enterprise Climate. Did I say that right?
In English, I call it the Climate Enterprise Convention,
Of
Convention
course,
des
it's gonna be the other way
Entreprises pour le Climat.
So tell us, what does that do?
It is, as its name suggests, inspired by the Convention citoyenne pour le climat,
Right.
which was an interesting French social innovation.
That brought citizens of France, for those who don't know, right?
Yes.
Randomly picked them up
yeah.
to design a convention, right?
To a convention, and they came out with 149 law proposals to tackle the diverse subjects of environment, climate, biodiversity, etc. The Climate Enterprise Convention brings together 150 companies of sizes ranging between 1 and 50, 70,000 employees, with the objective of having each company come out of there with a practical roadmap that puts business substance behind the Paris Accords, behind the Fit for 55 objectives of Europe.
Thank you. And same thing, we'll hear more about what is the dynamics of that, how it works, and this is based in France, right? 150 of French companies, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so Pascal, back at you. It's okay I call you Pascal, right? I didn't check, but let's, we don't know each other, but I think...
No problem.
It's fine. And you see me here. Okay, thank you, that's very good. So in the previous opening lecture that we had, we basically heard that the government, I took notes, was the only actor which can really change positively the situation we're in on climate change. So can you give us a state of the play in terms of these regulations that you are currently negotiating, and give us some hope that we're indeed moving in the right direction? Because if we base it on the lecture only this morning, it doesn't look very reassuring. So can you give us a state of the play? Where are we at?
Okay, so at least at the European level, so at the scale of the European Union, we are moving things in the right direction in an unprecedented manner. The Green Deal, so the package of more than 50 regulations, 50 EU laws that we are in the process of changing. So either it's already changed, like the European Climate Law, where we have now 2 key goals enshrined in the European law, the goals for 2050 being climate neutral for the whole European economy in 1 generation, because 2050 could sound late, but actually 28 years, so between now and 2050, 28 years to move from where we are to be climate neutral for the whole economy. It's massive. Definitely massive, much faster than the previous industrial revolutions. So it's massive, and it's enshrined now in the European law. In order to get there, we need to enhance our 2030 goals, and we have enhanced them because we were before the Green Deal at a level of target for 2030, which was below the Paris Agreement, and now we are at least minus 55%. But of course, setting targets, first, we need to set the right targets, but just setting targets is not enough. So we need, of course, to change the rules of the game in order to get and to reach our targets. That's what we are doing within the Green Deal. Just this week, we finally negotiate the change of the CO2 standards for cars. The price of and the rules of the carbon market, which is, of course, one of the key tools we have to drive the change for our industries. We put in place a global first, which is the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So the so-called European carbon tax, even if it's not a tax. Yeah. So technically it's not a tax, but in the French public debate, it's called a carbon tax. Global first to do so. And so on, and so on, and so on. We change 50 laws, again, at the same time. Some of them are also in the financial field, and Lucie knows that by heart. What we are doing is, I would say, changing 3 key elements on the financial regulation and connecting financial regulation and climate action. The first element is data to be able to have transparent market.
Yeah.
So texts like taxonomy, disclosure regulation, transparency, and so on. That's the first package. I could get back to that if you need. Second element is the risk, making sure that now we are fully aware, and even the central bankers are now aware, and the new doctrine of the biggest central banks in the world is that climate change, uncontrolled climate change, so 3 degrees, 4 degrees, 5 degrees, is a systemic risk. And then we have to find the means to move from this systemic risk approach to a micro risk approach. And that's for the negotiation of the prudential rules, both for the banking sector and for the insurance sectors that are on our table this year. So first is data, to have the right data and transparency. The second pillar is risk, macro and micro.
Yeah.
And the third one is assessment. How do we change the assessment of the value of a company under the constraints of carbon action? So what does it mean? The market value, or the accounting value of company X in a world of 1.5, 2, 3, 4 degrees of global warming. So in the financial field, I would say that what we are changing is that we address through various texts, we address these 3 key issues. And of course, I'm not going to give you the 50 examples. I gave you, I think, maybe 6 or 7 here. Yeah. So you can see that it's massive and unprecedented. And I hope that it's a message of hope.
That's great. Same thing, I'm always referring back to the previous speaker because it kind of set the stage here for all of us. He mentioned that politicians had a tendency to maintain all of us in the utopia of the happy transition by not wanting to be real about the cost and the trade-offs that were implied by the energy transition. And in particular, he mentioned the fact that we didn't have a carbon pricing system at the level of the European Union. So what's your take on that? Are you and the colleagues over there working in the committee and beyond maintaining us in this utopia of easy and happy transition?
Well, the first utopia is the belief that we can keep on doing what we have been doing and ignoring the fact that we are facing a war.
I'm asking you a question.
And that's the first utopia. And to be honest, that's what the politicians said first.
Yep.
Second, when you look at the carbon pricing as a tool, theoretically, and I insist on that, theoretically, you could apply carbon pricing to everybody and to have driving the change. But as a matter of fact, the same carbon price does not have the same impact when it comes to different sectors. So first, for instance, a carbon pricing of 80 euros per ton has a direct impact on the cement industry, really changed the added value. For house refurbishing, with 80 euros per ton of CO2, you just
Ah. I can't finish that
in
sentence.
terms of price rationality. So you can see just with this very basic example, cement on one side, refurbishing of houses, on the other side, that the idea that the same price of carbon will drive the change just does not fly in real world. So that's why with our, we use a policy toolbox. This toolbox is, yes, we use a carbon price for our industry. And by the way, the carbon pricing today is already at around 80 euros per ton, which is way, way, way higher than everywhere else in the world. And with the reform we are voting on next week, it will be probably even higher than 80 up to 100 something. So it already drives change, but it's not enough. It's not enough. So that's why, just to give you two examples, first, we put a price on carbon, plus we pass regulations. So standards, basic old school standards, like on cars.
Yeah.
If you want to change the drive, if you want to drive the change in the car industry from the engine we know today to EVs, zero emission cars, you have to have a price of carbon above 350 euros. It will never exist. Okay, or at least not in the time frame we have to fight climate crisis. So we need to have just regulation and standards in place. That's exactly what we do, meaning that by 2035, all the sales, all the new sales in Europe will have to be electric and zero emissions. So that's pure what we call planification in the French debate. That's exactly what we do at the European level. So we use the carbon pricing as a market mechanism when it makes sense, but we use old school standards and regulation when it makes sense and when it is more impactful. And when it comes to cars and tomorrow on trucks, it is clearly much more impactful than carbon pricing. And then the last element is the carbon pricing on households. I'm a big defender on carbon pricing on companies as one of the tools to drive the change. I don't believe in the carbon pricing for households. Why? Because households are not economically rational. You could make the slightly theoretical assumption, but still it works, that companies are economically rational.
Are
Fine.
they?
You can hire people, fire people, and so on. But you can invest, disinvest, and so on. But it's not true for a household. It's not true at all. You are not going to fire your kids because it gets too costly to get them to school. And if you live 40 kilometers away from a city center, no choice, no alternative. So it does not work, and it is socially completely regressive. And then you have the risk to lose the social acceptance of moving forward to the green transition. And once you have lost the social acceptance, you lost everything. So that's why we need to be ambitious and careful. We need to massively transform our economy without dividing, without splitting our societies. And it's the core of my mantra. It's the core of what I've been doing here in the Parliament. Okay,
thank you very much. I mean, that's clear, that's your mantra. So do I hear correctly that beyond your own positioning, we cannot expect from this environmental committee in the coming weeks or months to come up with carbon pricing at the European level? Sorry, I'm being a little pushy here. I need to make it.
I don't know who said that. We have, as I said, we are the only place in the world having a carbon pricing for our industries.
Yes.
So I don't know even, to be very honest, your question does not make sense. We have already a carbon price. We will have a carbon price for industries, and it will be raising, right? Then for households, we won't just because we killed it. It was my position, and I won, and we killed it because I think it's counterproductive from a political standpoint.
Okay, thanks. It's good. Now we've had the different aspect of that debate. Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me to be a little pushy here, but I'm sure you're used to it.
No
Mike,
problem.
yeah, Mike. So is business gonna save the day and save the planet? I think same thing. The argument we heard earlier is living now was probably only interesting in that part of the conversation. Was it's hard to reconcile, you know, the end of the month or the end of the quarter and the end of the world. So what's your view on that as Professor of
Well,
Practice?
I respectfully disagree almost completely with Professor Gollier, but he's already left, so it's okay.
Left. He was only interested in you, Pascal.
But, but let me first just compliment Pascal on the work he's doing, and I understand how mind-numbing and how detailed, you know, getting the legislation in 50 different laws and the Green New Deal, how complicated the whole thing is. And I wish you all the best, because we do need that bill to pass. And the work that they're doing on the government level is critically important. But government by itself will not get us out of this mess. To me, the engine of innovation, the engine of change, the engine of the cell phones you're using, the TikTok you're watching, you know, everything we do has been business. And the force that can get us out of the mess, government will set the rules, and business will do its best to play by those rules, and government can do a lot to incentivize business, but it'll be innovation, entrepreneurship, and business which leads the way, and in that, the state of play. Now, some would say it's half empty, and I think your organization does amazing in shaming and naming and pushing companies to go further. But I have seen in my career a change which you cannot even imagine. When I first started studying these things in 2000, you know, my dean said, "Why are you doing that? Do something more important," you know? And you compare where the world was in the late 1990s to 2000 to today. Even the last 2 or 3 years, we've almost hit what you could call a tipping point in the attention and the relevance and the place this has in the boardrooms around the world, largely driven by finance, who is saying, you know, if you're not sustainable, we're not going to invest in your companies. Larry Fink from BlackRock started that a few years ago. And the work that your organization and others are doing to push companies even farther is amazing. It's
he says it, but to be fair, you know, the investment of BlackRock are still not all moving in the right direction.
Yeah,
the talk is good, we agree, but...
But the fact that the companies feel they need to make the talk,
yeah, okay.
the fact that they need to tell the story, and that each one is telling the story, and that's driven by shareholders, by financial shareholders, it's driven by companies needing to be who they need to be if they want to get young men and women like yourselves to go work for them. They have to do the right thing. Customers are asking for companies to be more sustainable than not. Whether they pay more money for goods and services which are more sustainable is another question, although there are segments which you can. The car companies, for example, have said publicly they will pay 30% more for green steel. It's not a problem. It's just a question of getting the finance in place to build the steel plants. So I think we're at a turning point. And the other thing which is driving change, besides the weather already getting weird, is people's children. So the Greta Thunbergs of the world are everywhere. They're in people's houses, they're in their homes, and they're telling them to make change in your company. I think we were talking about that before. So I think there is an enormous appetite to change. There is a lot of energy to change. And, you know, we didn't stop using wood for fires because we ran out of trees, and we didn't stop using coal and switch to oil because we ran out of coal. And we're not going to stop burning coal and gas because we run out of this stuff or because government tells us. We're going to run out because the new energies will be cheaper, lighter, faster, and better. And the issue of energy storage, you know, once everybody has a 50 kilowatt hour battery in their car, the problem of energy storage goes away.
Yeah. So most companies have had a CSR department or like, you know, a sustainability directorship or whatever for decades. That's not new. And yet, you know, when you look at overall progress, we haven't made that much. So what's your view on that, and where are the trends now? Are these departments growing? Is this shifting to another part of the company for more effective action?
So CSR is a company does what they do, and then they should pay attention to the world. And what's changing is companies are saying, no, the world is changing. And if we want to be relevant in the world that's changing, we need to adapt our strategies to do that. And this is what you're seeing now, companies fundamentally transforming. Now, my colleague will say that they're going too slow. Yeah, so BP, for example, which 30 years ago was talking about getting into renewables, then stopped. Now the new CEO is going back into the same path. going too slow? Probably. Not doing everything they say they're doing? Probably. But you cannot imagine the transformation because if they don't make the change, their shares will be worthless.
Yeah.
Their assets will be underground and extra. So they have to turn themselves into energy companies for the new century.
Okay,
And they get it.
Yeah,
And they get it. The good ones get it.
Ouais.
And again, that's more Europe and the US. If you go to China, you go to different parts of Asia, it's happening perhaps slower. Although the Chinese, you know, they're doing more on solar, wind, and I mean, they're doing a lot of stuff at warp speed. So I think things are changing. I'm not sure there's going to be a painless transition.
Yeah.
But a transition to a low carbon economy is the biggest business opportunity the world has ever seen.
So if I'm a student about to graduate here from HEC, for instance, or from INSEAD or from IESE, and I'm trying to join a company to do good, will you suggest I look for the CSR job or somewhere else?
No. Go to the companies which have a future-proof business plan, which have a strategy to be part of the new world, which are rebuilding the world, because we have to rebuild the whole planet. It's really exciting.
Okay, thanks. So Lucie, you created Reclaim Finance because obviously you felt that something was missing or not going in the right direction or not going fast enough. Can you explain to us what was this motivation coming from? What was missing so that you had to create something new to accelerate change?
So I've been working on finance for a couple of years before, but mostly focusing on banks or on a tiny piece of the puzzle. While we all know it has been made also very clear through the adoption of the Paris Agreement 7 years ago that finance has a key role to play in the transition. It can really leverage the change, even if today most of the big financial institutions are blocking it. I will come back to the BlackRock reference a bit later. But I saw there was a need for one, and actually I will encourage many others to start another organization as we do in other countries. So tackling the role of the financial industry in climate and bringing these important players on board, because NGOs has been focusing mostly on government issue up to now or on companies, but clearly the financial sector was one of the missing piece. And another thing that Reclaim Finance might be doing that other organization might be not is we are blurring the line between what we call outside and inside strategies.
Yeah, can you unpack that a little bit?
So in the mind of most of the people from outside, and it's quite obvious, we believe NGOs are only here to do the name and shaming and to remind where we should go. They play a very critical role in being like kind of a compass, so they remind what is happening, what is science saying, and putting some pressure on financial and political and economic decision makers in order to remind them that we don't have the time, the luxury to wait, and that we really need to put all our energy on this issue. So they might do a lot of things, publish report, do direct actions in the street. We saw some of them last week. But then there's another group of NGOs, more kind of a think tank that only play from the inside and discussing with economic and financial players through the rule. So really bringing on the table that they would be like, they should act because there are a long-term interest in changing, in tackling climate change, because climate change will raise a lot of financial risks that they need to consider. What we know now is that unfortunately there is a tragedy of the horizon that Marconi talked about 7 years ago, which prevent financial institutions from acting in their best interest, because in the short term they will be motivated by a lot of other issues. So that's why NGOs can play a critical role as well, bringing from the inside, trying to change the rule of the game internally and also at the EU level. I think what's happening right now, just in terms of the direction, is that it's a very exciting time. What is being discussed, and Pascal talked about that at the EU level, it's really, really exciting. We are close to require company to publish transition plan, taking into account how they do impact the environment and society. It could change the way actually we consider the role, what is the value of a company. So that are very, very critical pieces that needs to pass. Unfortunately, there are a lot of challenges, obviously. We can expect a lot of lobbying. We can expect also the EU is not the world, and that we will still have to influence other regulation at international level. Another thing that is very exciting is obviously like that employers are starting waking up and trying to bring this issue internally, and that's really like a big leverage for change. We do believe, we see it on a daily basis, how the direction of companies react when they know their workers are starting echoing climate demands. They are really freaked out.
Ouais.
So
what you're saying that with Reclaim Finance, of course you do advocacy, etc., and lobbying, but you also work with company jointly to accompany them in the right direction.
So we do work with the financial institutions directly, but we do work also with a lot of other stakeholders. Half of our team is doing research and analysis because we run only data-driven campaign, but half of the team is campaigning, talking directly with the financial institutions, and we have one person whose job is to talk to the cities, to the employers, to other NGOs, in order to also make sure that we are well coordinated and that the same message is being put on the table of one financial institutions from different angles.
Yeah, okay. Pascal, from your perspective, of course, we all know and we read in the press the importance of corporate lobbies going to try to influence regulation. Do you see a change in the, from the civil society and the NGO push to want to work with regulators and politicians? Do you see that evolving as a trend and a positive trend?
Yes, I mean, including in the financial sector. But I must say that now in the money time, you still have NGOs, of course, pushing for green regulations, and or greener regulations, which is very good. But we have at the same time a massive lobbying. I can tell you that now, Brussels and Washington are the two capitals of lobbying worldwide. Yep. And now, as we are in the money time to adopt or not the massive climate package next week, I can tell you that I am under a wave, a tsunami of lobbying. Unfortunately, I would say 80% to weaken, to water down the climate regulation, 20% to support, and even maybe sometimes to go beyond.
So the 80% comes from what? From the corporate world?
If I have a message,
right?
If I have a message, from the corporate world, of course. If I have a message to the CEOs and also to the students, is just double check before moving to a company.
Yes.
Double, triple check the public affairs position.
That's a good point.
Because at the end of the day, beyond the blah 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 blah, we all know. At the end of the day, it's about investment and public affairs, because it's about technologies, it's about innovation, so it's about investment. I mean, you do not scale up innovation if you do not invest. And it's about setting the right rules. And setting the right rules is my responsibility. And then that's where we enter into positive or negative cooperation with public affairs. Okay. And I can tell you that one ask I have, and I made an op-ed that will be published this week in the French press, is that one ask I have to the CEOs is that if you are not happy with one proposal in terms of regulation from the parliament, from the commission, fine, it's legitimate to defend your company, but then you have to make an alternative proposal that has the same climate positive impact. Otherwise, if I take the lobbying of the lobbying position today of all the associations that are represented in Brussels, and I put all them together, I can tell you that it's not minus 55 in 2030. It's much, 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 much less ambitious because they do not play the collective game. So that's why it's very important that you students you double check, triple check this, because that's where reality is.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much for that. And I will pin that and come back. I would argue that the students also need to check what's going on, maybe in terms of internal engagement of their employee, or what's your take on that? Because this is where you're coming from.
No, for sure, students have to check whether they want to work for a company or not. I think what we saw with the employee collectives in the last years is that they are already, I mean, when you hear what the youth is saying, they say, we don't want to wait for having responsibilities, we don't want to wait that time. There are already thousands, maybe millions of people within companies who have the same level of awareness, who have the same willingness to act.
They're citizens, basically.
Yeah, because they're citizens.
Yeah.
And at the end, during some years, we wanted to really separate and split between your personal life and the life that you have as an employee. I mean, if we take a step back, we have to reinvent everything. So these barriers, they are really like blurring. And at the end, the question is how, at Les Collectifs, what we are trying to do really is how we activate this potential of all of these people who are already in companies, but in all of the sectors, in all of the geographies, who have this willingness to act, who are doing their own pathway to on environmental topics, and who can accelerate by 2 or 3 years, maybe, the sustainable path of their company if it's put at scale.
Wait, so give us, I liked your own experience, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that, how you went about it? Because also people might have a tendency to think that if you are an internal activist in a company, it might hurt your career or your progression in the company, right? So your case is a good case in point. So you joined BCG, when was that, 5 years ago?
I joined BCG in 2015.
Okay.
And after 2.5 years, I was like maybe most of you are doing today. I was reading a lot. I was like listening to podcasts, etc. And I was doing my own path. And at some point, I just wanted to act, and I didn't see any way to act because what we have to reinvent is just too big for every one of us to have an action. And I made a bet, and I say, okay, I give myself 1 year to do tangible things at the workplace. Because it's BCG, so I was working quite a lot. So I will not leave the company. I give myself 1 year to do
to try to change things from within.
Yeah. Launched a survey, gathered a couple of people to launch first actions. First actions were bottles, newsletter, changing the canteen by doing a framework of what is responsible food at a company. And soon it became like dozens of actions and hundreds of people. And this movement has emerged in many other companies. This is why we found Les Collectifs. But another example, in the insurance, for instance, you can wait for laws to tell an insurance you have to insure like the new mobilities, like with scooters, e-bikes, etc. If you activate the potential of the most aware employee within the insurance, maybe you would push for an insurance for this means of transportation with 2 or 3 years in advance. And if you multiply it by all of the companies, all of the products, all of the sectors, I mean, Pascal said we have 28 years until 2050. We have 8 years until 2030, which is another milestone. Yep. If you win 2 and 3 years, that's massive.
So can you give us a concrete example? So first, tell us how it changed the whole nature of your job at BCG. Because you started as a regular consultant, right, in the firm?
Yeah, I started the collective when I was 2.5 years at BCG. I was doing like normal projects. Now I'm working on climate and sustainability topics. I don't know if it's correlation is not causality, but I saw that 6 months after having started to engage myself on top of my job on these topics, I started to work on sustainability projects, which I'm doing now full time.
Right, so that can help you to, also co-design your job.
Yeah, this is a pattern we saw in many companies. In a technical textile company in IESE, another person for a collective, he started a collective and now he's working on the full end-to-end recycling of the textiles. So engaging, and you as students, engaging yourself in whatever is your passion will expose you to that. You will create new links, new connections, you will create expertise, and you will soon become a point of contact on that. And then the question is, how do you put it at the next level?
And so you brought that to the executive committee of the company. And what was the reception there? What happened?
At BCG, we are in close contact with the management of BCG in Paris, the collective. This is also something we saw in a lot of different collectives in companies. For the climate strike in 2019, we decided not to strike. We decided to write a manifesto that we sent to all of BCG, so it's 20,000 people, and we gathered 1,600 signatures of people saying, I want BCG to go on this sustainable path. And that was, and then we saw the CEO. We could have some great exchanges, and this is something that we want to. I mean, now I'm more experienced at BCG, so I'm more in the positions of opening the space for younger people to express themselves.
That's the other thing.
This is normal.
Created that process. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the question is how CEOs open the space for their employees, especially the ones which are the most aware, so that they have like. There is trust, but they can have the real conversations and they can live together and be together at the same firm the day after.
Yeah, great. And just a couple of questions, and I know you want to react to that, but you started with, you know, the single-use water bottle, etc., which is often how it starts in companies. Are you checking that BCG pays its taxes where it should be, that it doesn't pay for lobbyists in EU as well at that level of moving the needle? Is that something that you see the collectives being involved in terms of watchdogs?
The collective is not, I mean, it chooses its ways. I haven't looked at that. So on this, I don't know. The question is more on a broader scale. How do you, what's the frontier on which you can push? Yeah. Which is like it's the orange frontier on where you can have an incremental action, but it's not too far away, because as employees, if you're acting as a volunteer, you don't have the protection that, for instance, unions have. Yeah.
So thanks. I mean, I think that's great. Thank you for being patient. I want to react. It's supposed to be a conversation. We see that same with the NGO and firm lines of blurring. Same from employees and employers. You wanted to react to what Quentin said.
Just imagine. So BCG is a management consulting company. The demand for their services to help companies figure out their own transitions. You know, the CEO makes a speech, green wishing, blah blah blah, as Pascal calls it. But then people have to actually make it happen. So they go to BCG to figure out how. If you are the partner in charge of BCG's environmental practice, and there's a young man who's organizing the employees to do more, you're going to say, I want that guy on my team.
There you go. Don't talk to me, talk to the students.
And the message to the students is, be that person. All the companies you might want to work with, all of them are facing the same challenges of how do we make this transition? How do we keep the activists, you know, from attacking us? How do we move forward? How do we make money in the new environment? And they need volunteers. They need people to lead that. So okay. I think it all gets connected. Yeah.
I think that's important. Right, Lucie.
Yeah, just wanted to react very quickly about like the need for protection for the employees that stand up on climate, because obviously there is a lot of resistance. There is a lot.
There is. It's not also the utopia of the happy student
exactly
employee engagement. Right?
Exactly, because even if like all stakeholders at a macro level, at the institution level, have an interest to change, it doesn't work like that at individual level. Yeah. So you will face a lot of resistance, and that's why also like today we can see a lot of resistance even when it comes to one of the topics to be put on the table today is the role of shareholders during AGM season. And the reality is that most shareholders do not engage a company or are voting for fake climate plans. And I remember once one collective of friends, so they reached out to us because they wanted to push their employer to vote against Total's climate plan. Or they just wanted to have their opinion. So they wanted to meet and they wanted to bring the topic internally to the direction. So that's really going beyond like the cups or whatever. So it's really like a real management discussion. Unfortunately, they were finally not allowed to meet with us. So just a question of democracy and how do we bring the debate to a point where we are becoming like mature, professional, where we can have a debate, we can have a discussion, we can agree to disagree, but in a space where the workers are still protected to do that, and also the shareholders are not being insulted by the CEO if they vote against our climate plan, as Total used to do in France.
Yes, it's true. It's not all rosy because we've seen examples also of backlash for employee pushing strongly on environmental issues, but as well on equity, diversity, and inclusion in some countries. I mean, that's a fact. No. So
yeah, it's no, but at the end it's hard and beautiful at the same time, and I think this is we don't have to be candid on that. We have to be lucid. I mean, the climate and environmental and social issues we face, we have to find solutions we don't have in that we don't know today. I mean, for me, it's a question of state of mind at the end. It's not like business will solve the world or the politician will solve the world. It's like, what do we do today? What everybody is doing on his own part, on its own organization to move it, because it will require a move from everybody. And at the end, we can advocate for having engagement within companies and not being candid of the fact that every company is the greatest of the places and that the solution will come from business. I don't know. We call that in Collectifs the crest line. It's to be able to, at the same time, manage your own commitments, accept what is great, what is more difficult, and at the same time, like recognize the challenges and play with it and accept it.
And today, les Collectifs, so it's a network of internal initiatives in how many companies in France?
In 150 companies in France, from all of the sectors, all of the sizes.
Okay.
We started when we published the manifesto in Les Echos 1 year ago. We were 27, and we really, like, with this first group of 27, we were feeling that we had something in common. So we created the association so that we can inspire others to take action in their companies, see what we can learn from the others, share best practice, and also share this voice in a more united way of this new form of engagement. We see something new that needs to find its model at the end.
Thanks, Yannick. Thank you for being so patient. Yannick is a graduate from HEC. Yes, he's back home. Okay, thanks. That's why I felt like...
So the last time I was on stage here was right there with my guitar.
You were in the room, now you're on the podium.
With my guitar there 12 years ago.
Oh, but you made a transition from the room to the side to the stage. Well done. And welcome home. So 150, that seems to be also your magic number.
Yes.
So can you tell us exactly how that convention is working with companies to, same thing, try to accelerate action and change?
And maybe I'm going to start with sort of the problem statement. Eloïc, in his introductory words, mentioned something that comes up very often, which is, guys, we're talking way too much about the problem and not the solutions. And CEOs, entrepreneurs, they are people of solutions. They see a problem, they want to go straight away to the solution. It's the natural way of being, of thinking. With environmental issues, actually what you have to say is, calm down, take more time, and go deeper into what the problem is, because it's not just climate. We're in the Climate Days. I think most people here are aware it's not just climate. It's biodiversity collapse. It's only in Black Mirror that mechanical bees work. It's also depletion of resources, and it's also all the forms of pollutions, and it's the 9 planetary boundaries that we seem to be passing a new one every month these days. And so when you're a CEO and you have that information with you, you realize it's actually completely irrational to do something significant about it, because in the economics term, there's only carbon that has a bit of a price. Everything else does not. So economically, you're not viable if you're trying to tackle all of those issues head on. So if rationality is not what's going to invite you to go the right length, it's something else. It's courage. It's heart.
Yeah, because what we heard earlier was also that, in a competitive economy, if you go rational, you have no incentive to go in that direction, because basically the market is going to hurt your business.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that? Because that was a pretty strong statement, huh?
Yes, and it's there's a leap of faith component in there. And so coming back to what is the convention and how does it work?
How do you do that?
Yeah. So it's 150 companies represented in most cases by their CEO with a second person with them, which is in general CSR director. And in 6 sessions, starting by the first one was the complete view, the deep dive on what are the problems and how are they interconnected.
The science of it.
Yeah, the science. And realizing that, you can build wind farms to decarbonize, but it's going to put more pressure on mineral supply. And from there, looking at, okay, what kind of new business models can we imagine? And from there, looking at business-specific thematics like finance and accounting and marketing and innovation and all of those subjects, how do I rebuild a company on a trajectory to 2030? And it's one thing you were saying, doing all of that intellectually is, well, at least from my point of view, is massive and super exciting. I mean, when I compare what the CEOs are working on, the trajectories they're imagining now, to the business cases I had here presented by McKinsey, I clearly prefer these in terms of the intellectual interest for it.
So how do you got them to sign on? You went like, hey guys, we're going to do this. Do you want to join the sixth session? Or
so what we did is, and one thing to keep in mind is that we basically came from nothing. It was 6 of us coming from the business world. In different ways, we'd experienced the extent to which the sort of new mantra of people, planet, profits, in 95% of cases was 95% bullshit. And saying, okay, what can we do to make it different? And the way we went about it was each of us has our network and start talking about it and start to extend. I'm 33, the average age in the association is more towards 40, 45, so older people with a much broader network, especially when they come from ECP, HEC, and other schools. And then we started in September 2020. In December 2020, we put out a press release saying, okay, we're getting started. We're recruiting 150 CEOs. And then a few companies, CEOs that read sort of transition media, ecological media applied. But
they were already doing it and just wanted to join the club.
Yeah, but the majority of the recruitment we did was just that, was recruitment with, we had basically a sales team of 10 people who we pitched probably half of the CAC 40.
Yeah.
And who at the time, they all basically told us, guys,
we're already doing it.
You're 6 months old. You come from nowhere. I've had a CSR team for 15 years.
There you go.
Thanks. It's all well and good, but not for me. Now they're coming back. So what we did was a recruitment process where we had actual interviews with the different CEOs and said there was one. Just pitching, okay, this is going to be 12 full days of your CEO time over 8 months. That's a lot to ask. For a CEO it is. So in terms of, did we recruit greenwashers or sincere people? Greenwashers don't want to spend 12 full days greenwashing. Correct. They want to spend a few minutes at the end of a board meeting if they must, or just give it to someone else. And then the second part of the conversation after having pitched it was understanding what drove the CEOs who wanted to be in be in. And one factor we were talking about earlier is the generational component. A lot of these people told us, well, my kids remind me every night that I may be a CEO, but my company's harming the world. So they're not okay with that. What can I do about it? As an individual, I'm a bit lost. I don't know. And that's why the collective component is super important. Yeah. And the way it connects extremely well to what Les Collectifs are doing, and we do a lot of stuff together, is when you go into the area of courage, of heart, you're way beyond the facade that a CEO has in his or her everyday job. Yeah. And you're connecting to the human component. And one of the big messages for us is, it's okay and it's necessary in this whole context to be able to say, I'm a CEO and I don't know, I'm scared, I'm lost, and it's okay. And it becomes even more powerful when you can connect with your team, with your employees, and that there's this collective sense of no one has the answer in here, but if we work together, we can go much faster.
Thank you. And what about the trade-offs there, though, right? Because we heard it before, all the companies making a move there is because they have a rent somehow, somewhere. We heard the case of the steel company that would never do it because it's crazy, they would completely lose their market share. You have a steel company in your group, and they're putting together a plan, right? Yeah. So it's not completely crazy. It's
not completely crazy, and when you talk about new business models, it really touches upon the subject of cooperation. No, to me, it comes back to the prisoner's dilemma. I anticipate my comrades are not going to cooperate, so I'm not going to budge either. But if you create the conditions of cooperation, and for example, we have a truck making company,
Yes.
Renault Trucks, and the question they're asking themselves is, can we be economically viable by producing half as many trucks? And the way that works is if you start creating networks and collaborations with a whole other set of types of companies. What if, on the subject of last mile delivery, I think in Paris, 30 or 35% of last mile delivery is with trucks. What if 100% were with greener solutions, and where could Renault fit in there? And then you have other types of thinking, and I'm going to conclude on that one, where collaboration between public and private sector, where one thing you realize is trucks wear out the roads up to 10,000 times faster than cars. When you have tanks on the Champs-Élysées, it takes just one day to have to redo the whole thing. What if you reduce the number of kilometers driven by trucks, then you generate billions of euros of savings for the public sector? Okay, what if we did that and we went half-half on the money saved?
To what extent is the conversation happening in Brussels right now could help what you're pushing through the convention here in France, concretely? And do you have hope there?
Well, incidentally, Pascal was very kind to do a session with our participants a few months back. So
okay,
there's the European perspective there, and it's extremely true that it's absolutely necessary to think on a European level, because 90% or so of environmental regulation is decided in Brussels. And the big advantage of doing a convention of businesses is that many have a European footprint or a worldwide footprint.
Exactly.
And many thus have the opportunity to have a systemic thinking that's not just confined within the borders of France. So they have perspectives and ideas and proposals to offer for discussion with European and national legislators.
Yeah. So do you feel same thing, that the old divide between corporates on one side and regulators on the other side is a little bit outmoded as well? What would you say there? Is there more collaboration there, or is it still two different worlds?
To bounce back on the question of public affairs, I mean, there's always been lobbying, and it's never been a wall, a separation between business and public sector. What has to change and what can change is more how well legislators understand not the lobbyists, but the CEOs and how they work and who they are.
And create more of these bridges. Okay, we're going to take questions. If you're ready for questions, you can start by raising your hands. Don't be shy. We've seen different perspectives here. Oh, thank you for getting us started.
Thank you. Thank you for this amazing discussion. Actually, my question may be in unpredictable area, because I'm from Ukraine, and I'm thinking about situation with embargo in gas, natural gas. And I remember about statement of Einstein: in the middle of each difficulty lies opportunities. And my question is in practical aspects. How could we use these difficulties, I mean, natural gas embargo, etc., to push our maybe protection and new position in climate change and in rules, and I mean in European authorities' rules, etc. What do you think in this way? Maybe it's not a difficult, it's opportunities to change paradigm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is the terrible situation of the war in Ukraine an opportunity to accelerate change? Who wants to? Yeah, Mike, you start.
I can start. I mean, Europe's dependence on Russian gas is a geopolitical error, a geopolitical problem. The Germans built the Nord Stream 1 pipeline together with the Russians to go around Ukraine, which is what kind of allowed this whole thing to happen in the first place. So this is an opportunity for Europe to say, okay, now we will double down with the new Green Deal and really push for the eventual elimination of fossil fuels, including gas. I agree with the professor that it's a good bridge field, but Europe has to make a choice in this moment in time. How do we get off Russian gas? There's the green door, which is more renewables, more microgrids, maybe nuclear will play a role in that, etc. And then there's the black door, which is to ramp up coal production.
Yeah.
This is a political choice.
Pascal, what's your answer on that, and to what extent is it influencing what you are pushing now? Obviously, an important part of the forces.
Yes, of course. And just to tell you that I will have to leave, unfortunately, because I have a meeting starting in a couple of minutes. So, of course, we do connect the climate agenda, the Green Deal agenda, and the geopolitical one. And obviously, there is a massive positive correlation that if you go greener with more energy efficiency, more renewable energies, and for some more nuclear, and so on, then you decarbonize and you are less dependent on fossil fuels, whatever they come from. Because one of the risks of the situation is that we decrease the level of dependency towards Russia, and that's exactly what we have been doing now for the last 3 months. But we increase the level of dependency towards Qatar or Algeria. And to be honest, it's not that trade-off that is that positive. So the only way to have a pathway that is good for climate and good for real independency from a geopolitical point of view is to decarbonize and to speed up decarbonization. And that's exactly what should be endorsed today in Brussels by the European heads of states and governments, a plan called Repower EU, where 95% of the money will be to speed up the green transition, 5% only to go to gas diversification. So I think we are on the right track. To precisely to make this crisis an opportunity to speed up decarbonization.
Yeah.
And before leaving, thank you to all the initiatives. And it's not either or. It's all together we will win, or all together we will fail. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Just if you just hold on, sir. No, he's gone. Okay. I was, I know he's back. No, just
tell me 1 second.
One second, because as they're about to graduate and find a job, you've been a journalist, a trade unionist, working with NGOs, and now with governments and the parliament. What do you think is the best way for young next generation and these new graduates to push for that agenda? Where should they look at?
Well, I would say, of course, depending on their sensitiveness, but within the corporate world and the finance world. Yeah. I mean, NGOs have already, and Lucie knows that by heart as well, plenty of young people willing to work for them. What we need is to have within the companies people that are really driving the change, innovation, investment, and so on and so on. And if you have this in close cooperation with lawmakers, then you are really massively changing the rules of the game. Not only what you know in the corporate social responsibility, you have the usual expression of scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Yep. What you should be after is scope 4. Scope 4 is your own change, driving the change not only for the whole company, the whole value chain, but for the whole society. Because once you have invented a business model, once you have invented decarbonized technologies, then it's not only for your company, it's for the whole market to be changed. And that's what you should be after.
Thank you very much. Thank you for staying with us, and thanks for this nice ending. Good luck. We'll be watching you. Bye-bye. Okay. I had to let him go. So you wanted to react also
I just wanted to go back to the
geopolitical context. Yes.
Ukraine thing. Like today, what we see is that there will be like in every situation of shock, there is always like many players. There are always many companies and others that will push for more fossil fuels, and that's what we are seeing right now. Some fossil fuel companies advocating that because of the energy crisis, because of the inflation, the solution will be more fossil fuels.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what we should avoid. As the IEA actually has been making very clear as well that the solutions are actually in building our energy security on renewable energy, on sobriety, and there are many things that that are needed, which one player that I could mention is the role of central banks. Central banks could play a big role in disincentivizing financial institutions from financing more fossil fuel, while at the same time they could really support the financing of the solutions, partnering with the EIB on some green bonds, but also directly using monetary tools that they have to support the financing of building retrofits, which is a huge investment part that we need to scale up.
Yeah, and a huge
if we
opportunity
really
in France. I mean, there's tons to do there. Yeah.
So that's many things that needs to happen, but it's really important to be active and to build on what Pascal was saying at the end is regardless what the students will pick, either NGOs, I will say we still have some need for more people.
Yes, this is hiring people.
Or other thing, it's like don't be an observer, like be a player
be engaged.
of
There are
change
many ways, as we
and
see.
challenge the rule of the game, because you will always have people telling you it's impossible, it has never been done this way, but that was politics is about. It's about changing the rule of the game. And we have heard many times some financial institutions 10 years ago, financial institutions were telling us we don't have a responsibility on climate.
There you go.
We are just financing what the market wants and we don't have any responsibility in putting our money here or there. Obviously, the terms of the debate today is completely different.
And now we even see the Security Exchange actually building some new rules. You wanted to react to that also, and then we take
one very quick reaction on the subject of crises. And to me, a crisis is an opportunity to reframe the narrative.
Yeah.
Because humans aren't driven by rationality, they're driven by stories. And COVID, where you had President Macron stand in front of the camera and say, we are at war. That's, we're talking, what does war mean? We're talking about sacrifice with Christian. And once you've framed the narrative that way, then you're willing to accept sacrifices because that's how war works. So every crisis is an opportunity to reframe the narrative. And I think what we have to hope is to not have to wait for a moment where there's no tap water in Paris to start calling it war.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So we had another question. Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you to everyone who has taken time to be here with us today. I have a question for Lucie in particular. I've been recently interested in investment funds who claim to be sustainable, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are in how to make them or how to improve how we categorize sustainable funds over, really maybe they're really not sustainable, and what that discussion looks like at your company right now.
Thank you. Great question. So if you're looking for a job in impact investing, how you differentiate the place to go to work where they mean it and go deep and not the bullshit.
So obviously there is a whole debate about like what ESG is about and ESG a scam, which I will say like ESG is just about like considering the value of an investment or the need to go there, not based on financial criteria, but on non-financial criteria. And it should just be like obvious today to just apply ESG, but obviously ESG criteria doesn't make it sustainable. And there is this whole EU regulation about the classification of funds that you seem to know about, which according to a lot of the players of the system, not only to NGOs, but also practitioners, is actually making things even more blurry than it was before. On our side, what I can tell you what NGOs are trying to do. We are buying the data. We are right now scanning the funds that are being labeled under article number 9. And we are putting like our highlighter, okay, fossil fuels. And so we are making a case that these funds are not sustainable. And then we will do what NGOs does, so putting it online, putting it in the public space, because people, when they are told by their banker, your product is sustainable, they don't think they are investing in Total Energies. So there will be some noise around it, but obviously that's not enough. The whole point would be to push the regulatory agencies to step in and to make their job. So to make the ACPR and IMF do this assessment and become an institution that will also track and fine financial institutions for fake green marketing.
Yeah. So what's your name? Marcelina. So Marcelina is just looking at job ads, right, from impact investing company, claiming to be super green. What does she check before she applies to the job or when she interviews? Where does she look at? What's the fine print she needs to pay attention to?
There will be like many things, and unfortunately,
There's a lot of blah
availability-
blah everywhere, right?
Yeah, there is a lot of blah blah. Regarding engagement, Chris on the director of TCI, which is behind the S&O Climate, so the whole idea of having companies asking the shareholder for their opinion about their climate plan, just says that engagement is blah blah blah, talk, engage, no result. That's just his word. So there is a lot of blah blah. Unfortunately, the availability of data is not happen. I mean, it's not here, so it's hard to know. One thing very easy just on energies, even if I agree that energy is one thing, but there is a lot of other issue if one wants to call it self-sustainable. You can go to the coal policy tool or the oil and gas policy tracker, or you can go to the Reclaim Finance website where you will find answers about hundreds and hundreds of financial institutions. And if you see some red, it clearly shows that they are not on track to be part of the solutions today. And here I will just echo Antonio Guterres last week, which says, don't work for climate wreckers, and there is no need today for new investment in fossil fuels. And so any single financial institution which is doing that today is not acknowledging the gravity of the situation. It doesn't mean you shouldn't change and go and work for them, but I would say like give you 1 year and do everything you can, and if it's not changing, you are wasting your time.
Okay, Quentin, you had something else to add to that. What should she do?
Yeah, you can. I was in that position 6 years ago, and at the end, also trust yourself. Ask the questions in interviews. Try to see instead look at benchmarks. Try ask the questions you want to have, and try this out. I mean, if you try something, I mean, you're super young, so just go ahead. If in 2 or 3 years you want to change, I mean, that's okay. The careers will not be like 40 years in one company. It's a
real question she's asking, because of course there are like over 150 ESG frameworks that you can pick and choose from to look good. So if she only looks at the sustainability report, she's not going to go very far in terms of, right? So
this is also something.
So try and see.
The truth that what we said today, what is ESG and what is not, will change in the coming years. And it's like you were saying, the rules of the game will change. Yeah. I mean, the world has never been so volatile, so unpredictable. The risks and the opportunities are super high. So at the end, it will change. What you can really act upon is how do you behave in this like super volatile world. And for your job research, I would go like trust.
Take the risk, check if they have a collective, and
maybe just very quickly to add, because there is like no perfect investment fund today, obviously, because
that's right.
It's something that everybody started late.
Yeah.
So the question is, what is the red line? What are the minimal expectations that we should have from them today? And when you go to the website of Reclaim Finance, that's those things that we are trying to do. Okay, we are not going to be completely aligned with Paris. We have to be honest about that. Like the guidelines that we put on the table of financial institutions is the bare minimum to even try to get there sometime. So that's really the minimal. But then there will be like some financial institutions in France that are doing the best to change, and that we see since Paris they have been changing and changing and changing. One of them was there. When I came with them a year ago, I think I was invited by HEC Climate. So OFI Asset Management, for example, is one of the few asset managers which is actually doing something.
Yeah, and you could also think that your biggest impact could also be to try to move the needle in a place where they don't do it, right? So you could try. He tried, he managed, so is that what you want to say?
No, I was going to say, you can also look at a little bit the track record, because there's a lot of folks who seem to have discovered ESG or sustainability last week. And there are others who seem to have been working on this for 5, 10.
We're going to take the 2 and then we're going to wrap
up. So you might look at those. Depends. If you want to learn what good looks like, go to the ones who've been doing it for a while. And if you want to help change something, go somewhere else.
Sorry, and I know we're spending some time, but I think it's a question that others have. I'm going to take these 2 last questions together, and I owe them to you because you came to the front. Yeah, I forgot about that. Thanks.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much. I have a question regarding climate justice.
Yep.
Now, as we all know, the emerging markets and all the developing countries has a lot of dependency on fossil fuels still now, and they will be. But how do we all these initiatives that we are taking in the Western countries, how do we penetrate it faster into these developing countries, because they're also dependent on the financial institutions of these developed countries as well. So how do we make this transition faster for these countries and not just talk about the European or the North American countries?
We need a whole session to give justice to actually that. No, I mean, we cannot really, but go ahead. Maybe
just very quick, I mean, Vincent Petit, who works for Schneider Electric, wrote a book called The Age of Fire is Over. You know, and as innovation creates new business models, new technologies, and new ways of doing things, in theory, we can put those in place in rich countries and then eventually take the cost out and deploy them all over the world. So I think innovation is part of it. And then, of course, the Paris Accord has a provision for transferring and investing in that stuff, which will get there eventually.
Yeah, but attends. What about the financial pledge that were made to accompany the transition in, I mean, also,
well, according to the numbers I saw, I think we're up to 65 billion a year. The pledge was 100.
That was over, that should have been paid already, the 100.
Well,
sorry,
I mean,
you get me started, honey.
It's every year. I mean, it is going on. It has to be accelerated. It has to be done properly. But there is evidence that the developing countries in the world can leapfrog us.
Yeah, that's true.
And just go straight to the better. Because once things are better, cheaper, faster, and cleaner.
Yeah. No, that's true on the theory. Right. I think we were just talking about the overdue. You wanted to react to that, no? Lucie, you were first? Okay.
Yeah, maybe three things, obviously, like the 100 billion that has been pledged at Paris for adaptation, which is really important, and on top of mitigation. So that's something that is needed. The second thing, obviously, and that's obviously going to be like one of the main topics at the COP27, even, I mean, above all because it's in Egypt, so the focus should be on that. The second thing is to help this country do this transition, we should first stop putting them worsening the situation there. So today, for example, we are working with the Philippines, where several LNG terminals and new gas plants are being planned, even if the population is standing against these new plants and is pushing for renewable, which can deliver electricity and power to the whole country. And so that's also where, even in France or in Europe, we can play our role, because these projects are being financed by our financial institutions. Right. And the third thing is also changing the whole ways finance system and other economic players are tackling climate change. Usually it's about protecting themselves from the impact of climate change. And that doesn't work because it doesn't bring the measures that are needed to actually already avoid creating climate change at the first place. And that's why we need double materiality, and we need financial institutions and others to not look at how protecting themselves from climate change, but how stop being a driver of climate change. And we made it in France while we pushed all French financial institutions saying no to companies because they were building new coal plants and not because they were risky. That's really about preventing the impact at the first place. And we know that it's needed, obviously, because more climate change would mean more irremediable impacts. And we know the southern country will be impacted first.
Exactly. Huge inequalities here. You want to add something?
Yeah, to me there's also a component which is probably one of the hardest things in the world, which is honest conversations. In France, in the US, in Germany, and wherever in Europe, we've decided, we've set ourselves on a trend of, okay, 100% of cars are going to be electric. There are not enough resources in the world for the same thing to apply in India, in China, anywhere else. So the question, part of the question becomes, is the rich world okay with sharing? Which is a tough question. And I think there are many components, but if you don't ask that one, you're not dealing with the problem.
Yeah, exactly, because we've been enjoying the ride for decades, and yeah, anyway.
And today is really about like climate. There is something paramount about climate, but indeed there are also the questions on climate justice and biodiversity. What I see in the people have crossed with in the last years engaged in their companies is that these questions, they have already like integrated that it's climate, biodiversity, social issues, geopolitics, etc. And taking my cap of Les Collectifs, I think that even in developing countries, there are companies and there could be groups of people who know the local answers because they know the culture of their country, they know the culture of their region, they know the culture of their company. And for us, it's really about that. Everybody's talking about like taking local action. What I saw in Les Collectifs is that people, they are not saying it and then trying to centralize decision. They are like really doing it on the ground. And so I would trust people also to find solutions, and what is super important is to keep the communications and to connect these communities together and not having like a polarization with everybody like thinking in its own world.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I mean, it's not comprehensive answer. Need to put it in the next HEC Climate Days. We're going to wrap up. One key recommendation you want to leave the audience with as we just close this up, short and sweet. If people want to make, yeah. Oh, we have one more question. Oh, I was wrapping up to be on time. Yeah, go ahead. You have the question.
I'll be quick.
Short one.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm sorry. I apologize. Yeah.
No worries, no worries. So I understand that punishments and shaming companies is a very powerful tool to mobilize them towards being more environmentally friendly and sustainable. But I was looking at the other side of the coin, and what I mean is, do you think it is feasible to put incentives in place that companies can achieve or get to get them mobilizing in the right way, and not only like the heart and like moral compass, as Yannick was saying, but rather more tangible things?
Okay, carrots and sticks. Yep.
A very short answer is you absolutely need both, because within the CEC, having met like the presidency of the MEDEF, of the CPME to present what we do, met people in Bercy, their answer is, what you're doing is great, and there's just one ask we have, no constraints. Oh, sorry, that doesn't work. So it has to be both. There are companies, there are business models, there are ideas that have massive potential, that have a super desirable narrative for the future, and those companies need incentives. But for the BlackRocks who 4 years later come back and say, oh, by the way, without exception, what we do is maximize profitability for our shareholders, well, sorry, they're going to need constraint.
Can companies self-regulate, Mike?
So I kind of disagree with a lot of the gloomy narrative that my colleagues share. I mean, I think we're not going to run out of anything if there is better ways to do it. We're not going to slow things down, and there are incentives. If you think about companies and their medium-term survival, the companies which survive are the ones that's going to have new business models, better materials, better ideas. Yeah, and there is plenty of incentives. We do not need government to set those incentives. The market will set those incentives in the goodness of time, and you folks will go work for those companies who have a narrative which is attractive. Attracting talent is an incentive. The evidence shows that companies which have a better story, have a lower cost of capital, have a higher share price already. The world is changing. And I think we just need to kind of open our eyes and recognize it. To answer your other question before you get to me, go work for the companies you believe in. Go work for the companies which have that narrative, who show you a way, who say, we can build electric vehicles for the world. We may not use copper and other materials, but we'll figure out a way to do it. Those are the companies you guys should give your energy and your time to. And I think those companies are already finding incentive.
Thanks, Mike. So that's really a nice trigger to my conclusion that, Lucie, what would be your strongest advice to everybody as we go back to the desk? Yeah.
So I would first say we need incentive. We need much stronger incentives.
Yes. Public.
Because every investment which is going today into the development of a new infrastructure, which has no place in the carbon budget, this infrastructure is not here for 1 year or 2 years. This infrastructure is here for decades. So we do need stronger incentive. But I will say, like, the best advice is what I just said before, so I will be very short. Just do a player of change, and don't, I mean, when you have something to say, you can share it at the coffee machine, but you must go back, I mean, at the direction office. That's where things are being decided, and,
Yep.
and you need to be ready to stand up internally or externally if you want to make a change.
Yeah, have the courage to bring it up where it matters. Quentin.
First, I'd say be aware that the rules of the game will change in the coming years, and it will come from all of the decisions that are made from now to the coming years. So engage in something that you're passionate about. If it's in a specific field, but go to work for a company in that field. If it's not enough, create a collective or engage with some other people, or engage outside of your company. There are many ways to engage, but don't let the history be made without trying to at least to contribute. I heard in a podcast last week that it was a sociologist, and he was saying that we have the highest level of the number of initiatives. The momentum that we have today is quite similar to what happened in the 70s in a big reinvention, in when we sum up all of the initiatives, like the one you have, all of the discussion that we have. So let's acknowledge that maybe we are in this moment of big paradigm shift, and so then it means that we can reinvent everything, big risk, big opportunities. So just like get yourself, do something, and try to grow your impact, and do it with some other people.
Yeah, with other people. Yannick, what's the recommendation to yourself when you're still there?
When you start doing, you start feeling happier. That's for sure. I mean, I'm completely partial to this, but maybe Quentin can react, but the level of energy and enthusiasm in the convention with the participants is pretty damn high. So the question is, some parts of the picture are extremely gloomy, but what do you do about it after having taken the time to understand where the complexities lie and being okay with the fact that the future is not going to be the one that our parents and our grandparents thought it would be?
Yeah, thank you very much. So let me ask you to thank our panelists. The objective was to try to show you how to push for climate actions from different places in the society and the economy. If that's not something that is for you, to also show you that if you go work in a company, you will have to work with stakeholders, and they hear and see, they're willing to engage, they're nice, and they have good ideas. So with this, Yannick, Quentin, Lucie, Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think they're staying here if you want to speak to them. They'll be around, so come ask your final